y'all. This is Market Explainer. We are America's #1 business news podcast. I want to tell you about our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Market Explainer. We're building a community over there. We're going to start doing some extra shows and extra features on our Patreon. You can start with a $5 tier. You can go all the way up and join our board of directors. But before you think you know what that means, you don't get to join our board of directors and actually direct our business. It's really just a tier.
It's more of an honorary give us money title, right? Like, exactly. That's okay. So it's going to be, I'm interested to see how that and our community blossoms over the near and long-term future and that kind of stuff. That's one of the reasons I actually like Patreon. Danny didn't want to sign up for Patreon, and I kind of made him do it because I think some of the communities that I belong to for other creators are such great communities and interactions.
We're still in a dialogue, of course, as we always are with our various legal teams. I'm trying to convince them that we should use a different service, but we'll see where that lands. Nonetheless, we are working to build up a subscription base where we can provide you, the viewer and audience, with some additional value for money. Because at the end of the day, aren't we all just Mary Magdalens?
Well, and look, that actually ties in well with our very first story, which is...
the good people over at Politico have been sold to Axel Springer for $1 billion. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who is named Axel Springer? Got to be the coolest guy that has ever existed. Rides a Harley even in the winter kind of guy. But Axel Springer is actually the name of a German media conglomerate. Now, this is a mostly, from what I understand about Politico, mostly American blog or website about American politics. It's only... I think it was popularized by 2015. I don't remember when it exactly started. But the concept that this is being sold for $1 billion is we are in the kind of broadcasting media space, in the new media space. We can tell you that, at least by my estimation, as far as I can understand, this valuation makes 0 cents.
So there's always two parts to valuation for me.
Right.
And really the story here, look, here recently a lot of media companies, we've talked about them a couple of times, have been bought and sold and moved around here recently, and that kind of stuff. But valuations has two components. Are you buying something of value from hard value, meaning I'm buying the assets within that company, right? Or am I getting something else? Sometimes it's a technology, sometimes it's a different kind of asset, right? So in this, on the surface, you're right? What is Politico? Politico is different than a most of your old school news websites and newscasts out there. One of the reasons it's different, it relies heavily on subscription base. That's why I said Patreon kind of tied into this. They rely not on advertising. Politico does not rely on advertising. They do advertise, they do sell advertising, but that's not where their money comes from. It comes from monthly subscribers, much like a Patreon page. So that's one thing that makes them very different, and I think this is a heavy investment for this guy in that model versus the traditional news model. And the second part about it is Politico is, instead of your Washington Post or your New York Times or whatever, when they came in and they've kind of held to this, is they've made it very short, simple. Instead of these long, broad articles, they're very short, very concise, very what you need to know. The idea was to get everybody on the Hill reading this, right? They didn't want these long drawn out where people got to turn to this page to finish the story and that page. They wanted short, concise, tell me what I need to know, bite-sized stories about the relevant information, and then get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's what separated them. And I think between those two things is what makes them, again, I'm not saying worth $1 billion. I'm just saying that you can get a system that's been set up differently than most of your other news organizations.
And listen, I was actually incorrect. It wasn't 2015. I knew it was rather recent, and I'm getting older, so it was 2007, which for me feels like, didn't that just happen? Weren't we just doing 2007? But I guess it's not. listen, I just think here's one thing that I think is super weird about this is why is a German media conglomerate interested in American business? Right? I know that Politico has grown and it had something like 500 employees today, but I just think it's weird that a German media conglomerate is interested in American.
Are you pulling out the German,
No,
or is it just the fact that any other company in the world? I think it's just money. These two companies are already partners in a European type Politico, right organization, right? So they're already partners, right? And you've got the owner of Politico, which is a pop owner, right? It's a mom and pop. Politico is currently owned by one guy. Not a conglomerate of people, not a fund, not a whatever.
Which is a great payday for this guy.
Exactly. And it could come down to just, look, here's a partner that this guy partnered with back in, I think, 2014, 2015, to essentially create a Politico, but for Europe, right?
Right. It's called Political Europe, I think.
Yeah, and then you fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, and the owner may be like, look, I really kind of just want to run things. I don't want to do all of these owner things anymore. Yeah. I don't want to do all of this. Maybe he's the one that's turning around and going, hey, give me $1 billion. We'll keep everything the same. I'll keep running it. My staff will keep doing what they're doing. And you get more assets on your sheet. You know, maybe you're younger. Maybe you have bigger ambitions, whatever.
Well, no, right? I mean, Axel Springer is a conglomerate, right? They own a bunch of. I'd read you the stuff that they own, but it's all in German. So the only one that is recognizable to the Americans is going to be Business Insider and Insider, which they're a rag. They're not real news. That's just my opinion. This isn't a political show. I'm just saying my opinion, which is in Business Insider. I mean, Insider is kind of garbage, but I'm just surprised that $1 billion. And I think that Axel Springer had a EBIT of something like $600 million the last time it showed up, but revenue is totaling $3 billion. So I'm sure there's a firm backing this. There's probably a bank or somebody backing this, but $1 billion seems outrageous to me. Doesn't it seem outrageous to you?
I don't. In this article and a couple of other, I attempted to find the number of subscribers because again, it's a subscription based, right? Much like Patreon, subscription based article. And so I could not find anywhere where they publish the number of subscribers. Is Politico just raining cash? Right? Could that be part of it? If they're just raining cash, because I wouldn't even call what they put out a traditional article because they keep it so short and to the point. They can make article after article all day long of free flowing information because they're only saying one thing. They're not giving their opinions on it most of the time. They're not, researching the background of it like you see on these Washington Times or whatever. They're just making a statement like so-and-so stood on the Capitol steps and said blank.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, they can go, the so-and-so stepped on the Capitol afterwards and said blank. And
so the reason I think this $1 billion valuation is out of pocket is if you look at the digital media landscape and the kind of the abundance of transactions that have taken place in the digital, like anything to do with digital content, most of those numbers that have transacted at this high, very rare that they are just a single vertical, right?
Absolutely.
It's usually a collection of things. Like even Yahoo, which recently got spun off from Verizon Media. Like that deal had so much in it. It had like all these
different departments and different, they were in different scenes. Yeah,
this is a single website. It doesn't have a lot other than the political thing. And if you look, these numbers tend to be like they don't translate into really good business, right?
Everything staying the same. Again, I lean toward, it would not surprise me if this is just one of those situations where a guy wants to exit. So he's getting $1 billion, which is probably more money than it's worth, but this guy has it, right? This conglomerate has it. And they're here's $1 billion. We'll leave you in as the head as long as you want.
Right.
We'll take it over. Now, a lot of people are going to, because it is German and a German company and base company or whatever, a lot of people have brought up, and this is said in a couple of articles I read about this, they're worried about, like you just said, we keep seeing foreign conglomerates buy up media-esque kind of things. Does that raise a red flag? Now, again, this is not a political show. We're just posing questions here. Right. But does that raise a red flag, especially when you're talking about, again, Politico is probably very well read on the Hill, right, in D.C. and stuff like that, because of its bite-sized bits of information. It is still one of the few that has a quote-unquote neutrality to it, right? That a lot of people, again, I said quote unquote, and it's more in the middle than a lot, right? You don't look at Politico go, hey, that is absolutely this
I'll
or that.
I don't say that they are. Listen, I believe the concept of objectivity or the lack of bias in any political newspaper or whatever you want to call any political publication is silly. I think that's the pretense of that is absurd. I think that's impossible. Now, that being said, Politico is more down the middle than a lot of other publications that are super popular. Right?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's impossible to, to take human nature completely out of it, but there used to be a strive to do so, at least an attempt to do so, which is no longer the case in most news media in today's world.
Right.
So Politico trying to say, hey, and maybe that's why they're going so small and bite-sized, is they're going, here's the fact, and alleviating yourself from going, here's what I think about it, here's whatever.
Right.
And that may be what he's buying, and that ability. He does cite that, the new owner, or the person buying it, does cite that, saying, objective quality journalism is more important than ever, and we mutually believe in the necessity of editorial independent and nonpartisan reporting. This is crucial for our future success and accelerated growth. Here, and that's a quote, right, from the buyer, the new owner. The
Axel
reason
Springer.
I think, Axel Springer, which I agree with you, is the legendary, like, 1980s Def Leppard kind of name. Should definitely play an electric guitar. I hope he's wearing the leopard print spandex. It would be great, right?
Correct.
Very Mick Jagger is what it should be. Anyway, the point is I think you're seeing a movement in a lot of what I would call alternative media, which I kind of put us in that category of we're not any of the big media networks. We report on news, we give our opinions, and I think you're seeing a lot of that. And they're what do you call it when your what your value concept to your listeners is normally in a lot of these alternative media, breaking points and stuff like that is. Hey, we're more neutral. We're not saying that we're not going to give our opinions and be biased. We're just more neutral than your big ones that are out there.
So here's the thing. I consume a decent volume of media when it comes, I used to, especially more so than I do now. And as much as this show is in Politico, a lot of that is, the reason we keep saying that is because when we started this show, I repeatedly said, I don't want to be political because I don't think it serves anybody's interests in this category in business news.
Right, sure.
But because I just don't, here's the main reason I said that. I don't think you can make money like that, right? I don't think
a lot of people do. I mean, literally in this article,
thing, right?
In this article, it was literally not only did the Alex Springer say the quote that I just said about neutrality. I'm sorry, Axel. I apologize, not Alex. Axel said that is because in this same article it mentions about Politico's neutrality, or what they believe is their neutrality. They formed a partnership and then reneged on that partnership with Ben Shapiro. Because of specifically about this, right? The company Politico was going to partner with Ben Shapiro and give him a framework of which to work. And the people, the writers, the people at Politico was like, that is not us. And then they ended up going back on the deal and didn't work with him. And then you turn around and the new owner says, that's part of why I'm buying this company.
So that's, to me, like, if a website wants to show itself to be neutral, okay, the best way to do that, I think, is someone with really strong, quote-unquote, political opinions, is they should have a Ben Shapiro and whatever the equivalent of the opposite of Ben
Sure.
Shapiro is. I don't really look at Ben Shapiro as someone who people would say is not on one side of things. I don't agree with that guy about anything, right? But whoever they would pick to be his opposite, and I'm not saying they have to interact on the site. I'm just saying you offer both.
You offer
right?
both. But you can, why offer both of those extreme opinions when you can offer just information?
Well,
That's
so again, I'm just saying the reason this was put on our show today was because of the number. The number,
right, the $1 billion. But that's how I think you get to $1 billion. Again, I like a lot of the buyouts we've talked about the last couple of months. These valuations have gotten insane, and go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, relating to something we know a little better, which is real estate. I was listening to a real estate podcast not too long ago, and a person was saying, we built one of the only storage facilities in this particular in Naples, Florida, I think it was, and somebody paid us we were looking for in 10 years to have a certain value, right? And a conglomerate, a big fund came in and just paid us that value before we had even leased out the place. And they said, so that's what I think we're dealing with here is the same people that are going, not the same type of people that are running around buying up entire neighborhoods in our suburbs,
right,
are also looking at conquering the digital media landscape by owning a lot of this stuff.
I think you're exactly right. I think there's nothing that you could put down on a piece of paper, like you said, much like housing in Central Texas, especially. There's nothing that you could put down on paper to say, hey, this is worth that.
Yeah,
right?
I don't.
Chances are that's what these kind of people, funds, groups do. They can perceive to overpay because their plan is to then own it for the next 5-10 years, and they'll end up making money. That's their plan, right? You overpay for a home, let's say. If you stay there the next 10 years, chances are you make up what you overpaid and more. Now, is that a risk? Absolutely, but you're buying at the top of the market. I think anybody buying a house, buying a company, buying almost anything in 2021 has cost you considerably more than what it's quote unquote worth.
And the question is, there's two things. But my thing is, the question becomes opportunity cost, right? Which is, you're willing to overpay for it, but if there's a market correction and those prices fluctuate, if you're capitalized well enough to survive that bottom,
exactly,
then you got to buy the asset and hold it till it's worth $2 billion versus, you're going to buy it at $1 billion, it's going to crash to 700 to 600, but then it's going to go up to $2 billion. You don't want to be the guy who's competing to buy it when it's worth 6 to 7. So you're going to overpay today to own it for the $2 billion. But hey, listen, the first lesson of free market economics that is hard to drive into people's head is that value is subjective, right? We're seeing this in Central Texas. The houses are crazy, right? When I first got to Central Texas a long time ago, I remember driving past houses and thinking, who's paying $300 for this thing? And somebody just got done probably paying $800 for it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right? And when I first moved there, I was like, who's paying, I remember a young lady that I was seeing said, you pay how much in rent? I used to live down the street from you and I paid $600. You're paying $1,200? That's nuts. And I was thinking, where I came from in the Twin Cities, I'm paying $1,700 for this apartment, but I'm paying $1,200 in Texas. That's great.
Right.
So value is subjective. So Axel Springer sees something here, and I wouldn't be surprised because Axel Springer just partnered with KKR, which is a huge. They're not a venture capital fund, but they're an equity fund.
Yeah, a fund, right? Here's money. I want you to use it to make money.
So, I think this is one acquisition that Axel Springer's making of many to come, right? I think they scoop up smaller publications. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go after a larger right wing, which is have to put that in quotes, publication to have a little more balance on their books, but maybe not within a publication. So I think that's what we see out of them coming soon.
Well, and I think I think you're going to see a growth of this kind of media, right?
Yeah.
The Patreon-esque, the monthly fee-esque, right? The small monthly access to information that is relevant, that is right, that fits with what you want to know, right? In the niche that you're interested in, much like this show. I think that is the future.
And listen, here's what I think. I think we're going to see a lot of podcasts come out of Politico. I think they're going to work on finding their Crystal and Sagar and going that direction. I definitely.
I don't think. Why wouldn't anybody? When you see
Right.
the benefits of Breaking Points, Crystal and Sagar, and stuff like that, when you see the success of some of these new shows and stuff like that, why would it almost seems dumb that you wouldn't have that kind of, but you also have to deal with that kind of, there's a different kind of pushback that you get, right, in that kind of environment.
It's weird because both sides hate you then, right?
Right, exactly. And you just have to find your audience, and your audience may not be very vocal. Like, I don't think Crystal and Sagar's audience was vocal at all until they decided to leave, what was the show they were? The Hill, until they decided to leave the Hill, and then announced it, and then their followers, their audience, came out of the woodwork, right? But it wasn't up until then that they were very vocal. Only the people that complained were vocal, right?
Right.
And then that kind of stuff. So anyway, but
that's a business lesson. That's a business lesson. People who are complaining are always louder than the people who are happy with your service. That's just the way it goes.
Absolutely.